tuning in today, everyone. I just want to let you know my book is out and available on Amazon and Barnes& Noble. The name is Parents, Our Greatest Teachers. And now, back to our episode. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Alex Balgood, and this is Leap of Health. And today we have Scott David. He's a journaler, student, integrator, guide. He works with somatic attachment in the therapy. He's a writer, a visionary, a trainer, a coach, a consultant. I mean, you're everything. And I love to talk to people like you. And today we're going to be talking about the nervous system. It's so important. And I feel like a lot of us don't know much about it, especially when it comes to what it does with us, when it comes to our behavior or our traumas and things like that. Welcome, and thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure, indeed. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, thank you. And before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, like many, I've done a lot of things. I've explored a lot of different ways. I grew up overseas, and I start with that because it gives me, it's given me, as a white person growing up in a non-white culture, a non-American culture, it gave me a suspended sense of thought, because I was constantly having to go back and forth between two systems of thought, two systems of culture, two systems of ways of being in the world. And while that created a lot of stress for me as a child that I don't think was handled very well, speaking of nervous systems and kind of what that developed in me, it also gave me a reference point for looking at any of my experiences from multiple lenses. And I think whenever we're talking about our health, whenever we're talking about our identity, whenever we're talking about what we want to do, whatever our goals may be, it's absolutely vital that we end up using a multiplicity of different lenses to be able to approach those kinds of questions. So oftentimes I think we get stuck because we're locked into a certain perspective, and that perspective itself is the problem. Mm-hmm. And we keep sort of rehashing the same fixes on the same problem with the same lens. And ultimately we need to broaden our lens out to start pulling in different ways of looking at things. And so for me, that's encompassed a lot of a lot of life experience in terms of exploring spiritual paths, energetic paths, various forms of religion, spirituality practices, as well as psychology, and ultimately coming to recognize that in all the years of study and approach and working on self, that the piece that was greatly missing for me was the nervous system. How does my nervous system integrate with all these wonderful and sometimes terrifying thoughts that I have in my head, these feelings that I don't know what to do with, I don't know how to sort and sift, I don't know how to work with them, and being introduced and then diving really deep into the inner workings of the nervous system as it shows up for us in any given moment, has provided a path forward for me that I get so excited about offering to others, in terms of bringing these different elements, these different aspects of how we experience ourselves. And I'll just give you a small example for kind of how that shows up, I think, for all of us. We've all had these moments of what I might term magic, and I use that term very, very, very broadly, right? It can be anything from taking a yoga class and the instructor saying, open yourself to the energy of your third eye. And we might have been introduced to that, we might have studied that before, maybe that's our first introduction, but suddenly we're being introduced to a whole new kind of ethos of how we're experiencing ourselves. And suddenly we bring our attention here and we sort of start to feel something maybe, or we start to think something, but we don't know what it means. Mm-hmm. It's almost a throwaway comment made in a moment of moving our bodies. And how do those two things really fit together? Well, that's kind of one of the driving forces of all the work that I do. And these moments of magic might also open up something in our emotions, in our thinking, in our bodies even, that give us this sense of profound sense of connectedness or joy or power or security. And that comes with a flood of feelings that we then walk out of that space, we walk out of that moment, we move on and we go grocery shopping, we pick up the kids, we interact with a loved one, we interact with an intimate partner, and suddenly that moment and those feelings have shifted, they've transformed, and we want to get back to that moment of magic. And yet the nervous system says there's something else that needs to be taken care of right now. And that can create a great amount of angst. It can create so much interrelational distress in those moments. It can cause us great cognitive or thinking frustration and confusion. All sorts of things can come in that moment, in that nexus of what the nervous system is wanting versus what our mind and our spirit is wanting to kind of recreate or re-experience or hang on to. And so it's kind of like those kinds of experiences for me that I started paying attention to. I started asking the really tough questions of why do I keep going back and forth? Everything that I was taught says I should just be able to stay there, and yet my lived experience in time and space is I'm rarely there. And how do I make sense of that? How do I begin working with that in a whole new paradigm and with a whole new frame of reference? And so for me, that's we're really learning about the inner workings of the nervous system, the flesh and blood that happens inside of me, and what it makes me do at the end of the day, and what it tells me I need. How do I start listening to that better? And how do I bring that into that space of combining with magic?
Yeah, for sure. And so going into that, for everybody that's listening, I know we all have learned about their nervous system in school. Well, a little bit, some of us more than others.
Sure.
Tell us exactly how the nerve system works, or a little bit about, so people can understand why it's so important.
Absolutely. So do you mind if I do just a little experimental questioning with you here? Just to kind of illustrate exactly what I'm getting at here. So
yeah, of course.
It's kind of one of my favorite questions to respond to when people say, what are we talking about here? So I would ask you to offer me a definition of exactly what a thought is that nobody would have any need to argue with you or have a different opinion from you or even really need to add any further nuance than what your definition might be. How would you define exactly what a thought is?
Great question. Yes, I thought I think maybe something that comes to us, whether it's past, future, present, maybe just like a random question sometimes. Sometimes it could be something creative like, oh, that will be great to do. Or, thoughts come in all shapes and forms. It could be like, what am I eating in the next 5 minutes? Or what am I doing after this?
All the way up to what am I doing with my life?
That's the main question always.
Right?
Yes.
And all the thoughts in between, what am I going to eat in the next 5 minutes?
Yeah.
To the great existential questions and thoughts and
yes.
thinking for it, right? Thank you, and thank you for letting me put you on the spot.
Yes.
Fortunately or unfortunately, your answer also speaks to a complete disconnection from the body. What I mean by that, right, is that if we can start to see that our thoughts are simply electric impulses that innervate neurochemicals that jump across the space between two neurons, and that physiological process in our nervous system that lines up several of those neurons in a particular order or pattern in conjunction with the other neurons that they're all connected to, sending electricity and neurochemicals all together. At the end of the day, that's the physiological definition of what a thought is. Okay. Now, the relevance of starting to see our thoughts in those terms is because that same definition is applied to emotion. That same definition is applied to our triggers. That same definition is applied to how we end up making choices, the programming that's wired our brain and our whole entire nervous system, which not just our brain, it's all throughout our whole body, touching every organ, touching every reflex, involved with our hormones and with our immune system and with our mobility and the way that our bodies structure themselves. It's all the same process. It's all linked. So when you're hungry, when you feel hunger in your body, the sensation of hunger, that's actually traveling along neural pathways that have been created right alongside your childhood trauma, a really awful breakup, messages from culture that you've internalized about body image, calorie counting, right? And in that moment of asking yourself, well, what am I going to eat? Your whole nervous system, based on all that it's taken in over the course of your entire life and wired itself around all of those experiences, is making a pretty overwhelming and, to be honest, a freaking amazing decision about what you're going to eat in 5 minutes.
Yes.
In other words, a thought is never just a thought. It's a whole body experience that's connected via the nervous system. Right? Yep. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And when we start to kind of have our eyes opened to just how far this particular rabbit hole can go, it can start to feel a little overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And it's certainly not my intention to overwhelm anybody, but it's also a wonderful opportunity for us to start somewhere doing things that we've just taken for granted or that we've never really challenged or questioned. We start to identify or shed light on what happens when I have this conversation with my intimate partner, for example. What happens in my body? What is my body telling me is going on here? What is spirit telling me is going on here? How do I discern the difference? What's the difference between my intuition and my programming?
Right.
And our nervous system is kind of central to all that. It's talking all the time, even if we're not listening. And so a lot of this is how do we start listening to our nervous system in a whole new way? In our culture, we really spend, and we're trained to spend a lot of time just listening to the thoughts. And yet the nervous system has so much information that it's wanting to share with us. It has so many ways that it's encoded to work with things that so many times are the ways that we've been told to operate or told to assimilate information or experiences is just not letting us do. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yes. No, that's pretty great. I think as you were saying earlier, having a different perspective on how we act and perceive things, especially with our thoughts. I mean, just this very simple example about, what am I gonna eat in 5 minutes? I literally just had this conversation with myself like an hour ago, and as you were explaining the whole process on how it's not just that thought, I had, I guess I was not paying too much attention, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, holy crap. I just thought of all those thoughts before I make food. And it was pretty much like, make sure it has protein, make sure because obviously I think I had healed a lot of my self, a lot of my past trauma of body shame and things like that, that I think my conversation that I had previously for me to cooking, it was not like that's going to get me fat or things like that, which in another time probably those were my thoughts, or like all these little messages that I had before I make food. But now I could see how it has changed. Now I was like, well, make sure it has protein, make sure you put some vegetables. You didn't eat vegetables in the morning, make sure you put some of that. And that all happened like in a quick 5 seconds. And then I was already like, oh, okay, this is what I'm gonna make for food right now. So it is super important, as you said, to have like this other perspective and to start to listen into our nerve system. I think we all are like hearing those whispers, but not a lot of us are really taking the split second and being like, wait, what was that? Why am I doing this? Did my mom said this? Did my dad said that? Did culture is telling me this or that? So I think it's like super important. Tell us a little bit about how like the nerve system now it kind of like acts with it, or I'm not sure what will be the proper word with our feelings, because now I think we can process now that our nerve system is telling us a lot of things. How does that related to our feelings? So, and just, if you want to continue with this little example of the food, I think it's
Sure. So I'm trying to think of a good way to wrap that in.
Yeah, for sure.
And for me, the word feelings, the way that a lot of people kind of reference their experience with the word feelings, can be divided into two parts. One of which is what I call just emotion, and one of which that I call sensation. So on the emotional side, it's more emotion. I don't really have a better word right now to kind of describe that with, but to separate it from physiological sensation.
Okay.
Right. So let's just say with the example that we're using here with regards to hunger. How did you know that you were hungry? How did you know that your body was hungry?
You start having like this like tummy thing, like the feeling, not pain, but it's just like that sensation that you already know, like, oh, it's time for dinner.
Yep. So believe it or not, all your belly is doing is sending certain signals up certain neural pathways to a particular part of your brain. And then that might get interpreted in any number of different ways. But I got to back up for a little minute, because you might feel your hunger as a sensation in your stomach. Right? For other people, for any number of different reasons, they feel it in different places in their body. For example, when I feel hungry, I feel it more as like this almost anxious feeling throughout my whole body. Right? And for me, that's kind of that first sign of like, oh yeah, body's hungry. It needs nourishment. It needs calories, and it needs vitamins, and it needs those things that it hasn't had for a while. So for a lot of us, it's kind of that first step of like, okay, so what's the physical sensation? And then the emotion might be a layer on top of that, which might be frustration, anger, anxiety. And what's going on there is that at a very primal level, at just the body's what I refer to a lot as the autonomic nervous system, which is kind of the life support segment of the brain. The body is actually going into distress when it's feeling hunger. Another word for distress is threat. There's danger. And so it's sending some signals, and the brain is interpreting those signals from the body as, ooh, this could be dangerous. Right? And then it kind of sends some more signals up to, ooh, what other experiences of danger like this have I experienced in the past? What are the outcomes? What are the stories? What are my memories? What are the things and all this is happening unconsciously. And then we might start to have some emotion around that. We might start to experience fear. And again, it might be really, really subtle. Right? It might have to do with past dieting experiences where I was told I had to ignore or try to suppress my body's sensations and the signals of hunger, and that if I didn't ignore it just right, according to whatever diet I had imposed on myself, right, then there were going to be all these consequences that might include social shaming, that might include rejection, that might include not feeling attractive or not being attractive to the people that I want to be attractive to, right? So you can start to see that based on some of our programming and our stories and the experiences and the outcomes of those experiences for us in the past, we start to maybe have a whole slew of emotions, fear, rejection, right? Or not. Maybe my experiences of food haven't involved any of those kinds of things. Lucky me. The rare minority. but maybe I have that hunger pang, and then the story is, oh yeah, when I'm hungry, I always get good food and I become satisfied and I enjoy time with loved ones. And so I start to feel excited. I start to feel delight at the thought of like, ooh, I'm gonna go make food. Even if I'm going to eat it alone, it's all these associations in my past that are connected to a physical sensation that might in and of itself be really, really minor. But then we start to have all these emotions that are associated with it, and we can track those back to past experiences. And so we start to have these feelings, and then of course those feelings turn into, like, depending on how potent those feelings might be, they then can generate certain stories or behaviors or choices, right, that we then decide to go enact, right? And all of that happens in a split second.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
A split second, and because we're doing this a million times a day. Right? A million times a day, from the moment that our eyes are opened in the morning, we're in it, making these million split-second decisions. Right.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I think we even probably, most of us, take for granted our nervous system because of all the continuous choices that we make for our daily lives. Absolutely. You know, getting up, making breakfast, driving to work, doing everything that you do throughout the day. Even just right now, we were kind of like talking about, well, I was kind of like mentioning to you that every time I press on the recording for Zoom, I'm like, which one do I pick? It's all these questioning and all these choices that we make throughout the day. And I think also it contributes that our fast-paced life, we don't really stop and think about much of what's happening. It's just, we almost take it as that's what it is, let's go. Yep. You know, and we just keep making sometimes the same choice, sometimes more, you know, bad choices, maybe better choices, but we continue moving through our lives like that. How
Absolutely.
important is kind of like take a seat back, take a moment, and actually see what's happening, how our body's communicating, what our body's telling us, and how this really affect us on our daily lives.
A lot.
Yeah.
It's massive.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot overstate the significance of the impact on our daily lives. The reality is that even if we lived in the most low-key, small community, indigenous type existence without technology, right? Without electricity, without gas lines, water lines, and any of that, there's still so much need that our nervous system has to utilize what I call automated procedural responses, muscle memory, if you will, but in the nervous system. It would be impossible to function in any time or space, but especially with all the stimulation that's coming at us. It would be impossible to slow down and to consciously make each choice from a place of full awareness. We wouldn't get anything done. It would, if you think about it, it's actually the experience of being an infant. An infant doesn't have a memory bank. They don't have past experiences, both positive and or negative, successful, to draw from in the nervous system to say, what is this, right? And so the very first moment, within the first couple of hours of birth, and having the umbilical cord be severed for the first time, that infant experiences the physiological sensation of hunger for the very, very first time. And there they have no clue what it is. As far as that nervous system is concerned, that could end their life right there, that danger. They have no experience of having the breast or the bottle be put in their mouth. The nutrients going into their stomach, and then the stomach going, oh, I'm okay now, and sending signals of positivity up to the brain to go, we're good. Right. And that's just the very first example. That's the first. But then if you think about it, new colors, new sights, new smells, new sensory experiences, new emotional experiences, right? We're constantly getting exposed to these and building up a memory bank of what to do about them. The nervous system is kind of building these things in as automated responses. And I would say that once those are built, we're not really making choices anymore. We're reflexing. Right? It's like if somebody were to toss something at you. Right? You have all these reflexes of having things been tossed at you over the course of your life. And so you have this assessment protocol built into your nervous system that can happen extremely quickly, that first of all identifies the object, tracks its arc across, is it going to hit me? And then tracks, what is it? How heavy is it? Is it going to injure me? And then along with all of that, initiates a reflex in the body for protection. Right? And all of that happens, and all of that's been programmed.
Yeah.
Everything along that sequence is programmed. So I would say, is that a choice? No, it's a reflex. Language itself, the words that we use, as you and I are talking right now, is a reflex that's been conditioned.
Right.
I'm both you and me in our encounter as we're engaged here, even though it's virtually, we're not making choices about how we sit. You didn't ask me if it was okay for you to sit this way. I didn't ask you if it was okay for me to. We just presumed we'd be sitting, we'd frame ourselves in the camera, and then we'd go from there, right? We didn't make any choice.
Right.
And thankfully it matches up. But but my point is that those are reflexes that we didn't make conscious choices about.
Correct.
And so the second part of and we need those, otherwise we'd be totally flooded. We'd never get anything done. Right? We'd still be literally infants continuing to experience. And so there's a gift of our nervous system that it does have all these reflexes that have been built up, right? And then of course there's reflexes that have been built out of adverse experience, or poor outcomes, or powerlessness, or violation, or abandonment, or trauma, or shame, poor self-worth, et cetera, right? That we've experienced. And then we have a lot of those behavioral or relational reflexes, or even thinking reflexes, or coping reflexes. And those are a lot of the focus of the work that I engage with people around. Hey, let's slow down around some of those.
Yeah.
And we do need to slow down. We do need to make time out to step away from all the stimulation that kind of keeps triggering or keeps pinging on just these reflexes that we use to respond and protect and try and navigate through life with. And so it does require us to slow down. And sometimes even when we slow down, we're still using the same old lens to process. And so sometimes we need to slow down and get a new lens.
Yeah, for sure. And I like that you touch on how we are building all these things, whether it's from good experience or bad experience, all these nervous connections. How do you work with your clients? How do you work with them when it comes to the nerve system? Because I what are some of the modalities that you work with them? And maybe a step back, how does the nerve system and like maybe anxiety, depression builds that connection that which we keep just repeating and repeating and repeating?
Yeah. I would probably need 2 years of somebody's time to really lay it out.
Okay.
But how do I work with it? I think the very first thing is getting people to slow down.
Okay.
And one of the things that all of us need to slow down are repetitive, reflexive kind of ways of talking, of thinking, of processing, of feeling, of sensing, is to feel safe first. And so a lot of what I do involves kind of helping them to feel safe in the conversation, in the relating with me. So sometimes I'll have a client who comes in and they just start talking. And I'm like, oh boy, they're already in their old modality and they're paying me and they're investing in themselves not to do that. So what do I have to do? I have to, as gently as possible, as compassionately as possible, go, hey, let's slow down. You're actually working with me because you want to do this in a new way. So can you let me direct that for you? And when they can start to see that, oh crap, yep, you're right. I've been doing it that way my whole life, and that's exactly the reason I'm right where I'm at, reaching out to somebody like you. It helps them to feel safe because a lot of times our reflexes have taken over. And we don't know all the feelings or all the stories or all the reasons why we're feeling nervous or why we're feeling anxious or why we're talking so fast. And so, and maybe for us, there are times when slowing down actually wasn't safe. Might have might have led for us, or might have led to us being more hurt, or more rejected, or more abandoned, or more disconnected. And so a lot of what I do is just starting by helping people to feel like, I get it, I see you, I know what you're going through, I know what it's like to be in that space where you feel out of control, and helping them to slow down. And I have lots of tools and ways that I do that, but it's kind of that first thing of like, let's slow this down. And one of my favorite questions along with that is to ask them, like, where's the fire? If the fire is actually outside of you, in other words, if it's an actual fire that we're in, then please, by all means, let's move quickly. Right?
Yeah.
By all means, let's run. Let's get our nervous systems amped up and let's jump. Right? Let's figure that problem out, and we'll do that together, and we'll get out of here and we'll get to safety. Right? But so many times our nervous systems are acting as if there's a real literal fire. And so maybe it's in an interaction where we believe that we have to like talk and 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 talk, and that if we just talk enough, that eventually we'll put the fire out that we're feeling in our body. And so sometimes it's about drawing our attention to the fact that, in this conversation for the next however long we have, you're not going to be checking your emails. You're not going to be checking your text messages. Nobody's going to die. And if somebody you love actually is in danger, you're probably not going to check your phone until the end of the session anyways. So you've already decided that it's okay and that there's no fire outside of you, right? So what if we brought our attention to the fact that there's no fire actually here right now? Maybe we might just be able to slow down, and in slowing down, be able to see some new options start to emerge. Right. And once people can actually sort of take that in and actually feel themselves slowing down, then a lot of times it's okay. Let's see if you can feel maybe just one thing that's happening in your body. And so, and there's a whole, again, lots of process involved in that skill that has to be developed. But one of my favorite things, and my clients hate it because I ask it so often, and they're like, you're right, is great. So you're telling me about this fight that you had with your child. Rather than me trying to fix the conflict, rather than me trying to fix whatever you're feeling, can we slow down? Can we check and see if there's an actual fire first? And then maybe once we've done that, as you think about that conflict with your child, can you name one thing that you feel somewhere in your body? And they're like, I don't feel anything. I'm like, okay, slow down a little bit more. And maybe take a few deep breaths and really feel anything in your body. I don't care. Feel the sensation of your belly moving as you breathe. Feel your chest rising and lifting, but bring some attention to some physical sensation. And then as they begin to kind of associate into their physical sensation, right? Then what we can do is we can actually work directly with the body. So a lot of times people talk about their chest being tight. So I'm like, great. Your chest feels tight. What if, instead of thinking about what you can do about the conflict that you had with your child, what if you actually softened your chest? What if you actually gave yourself a little chest massage? What if you actually stretched out your shoulders a little bit? What happens if you do that? And inevitably, Alex, when people find their bodies and they start to do something new with their bodies in those kinds of spaces, their thoughts automatically start changing about whatever the problem was.
Right.
Right. unfortunately, in our culture and in our society for the last, approximately 2,500 years, we have been trained to operate out of what I would refer to as a very masculine approach, which is mind over body. If I can think it, if I can figure it out, if I can solve it, then I can shift the feeling, then I can change the feeling. And whatever the body's feeling, I'll just ignore that until I figure out the solution up here.
Right.
And unfortunately, so much of what happens up here is processed in words, in concepts, in thoughts. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the least effective part of our brain, and we're trying to use it to control the most powerful part of our brain. It's just completely backwards.
Right.
When we can find our body and work directly with our body. So coming back to our example of hunger, let's say, if I can feel the hunger in my belly, and then I can recognize, oh, yep, here's this slew of thoughts. Here's this slew of reflexes that I've always operated on when I felt that. What if I take a moment and I say, what does body want to eat? What is body hungry for? Does it want protein? Gosh, yeah. My chicken breast sounds just like, and I start salivating and I'm like, ooh, that's my body telling me what I need right now.
Right.
Do I want a lot of carbs or ice cream? Maybe. Maybe, but if I really sit with the body feelings, it might be just a few bites, a little pick me up, a little sugar. And then I'm like, you know, I'm good. If I eat too much more than that, I'm going to feel heavy. I'm going to feel gross. And so we begin to listen to the body this way more directly. We begin to operate more from the body's messaging and what it wants versus what our head has been programmed to reflect. Right. I'm trying to remember if there was a question.
We were talking about the some of the things that you do with your clients when it comes to the nerve system. But that brings me to how important, and I think you've been talking about it, but because I feel that, as you mentioned, people takes their feelings apart from their body, but how important is to actually bring those together to actually heal trauma. And
absolutely important. It's absolutely, we will not heal trauma. It's actually one of the central questions of my personal journey as well as my professional journey. I did years worth of spiritual experiences. I had lots of insight and lots of aha moments, lots of moments of liberation from a feeling of stuckness. And yet I kept coming back to feeling stuck. Why? It's because I wasn't in my body. I wasn't processing the stuckness, the trauma, if you will, as it lived in the body. Our bodies are built, they have built-in mammalian DNA encoded mechanisms for processing trauma. And sometimes it looks and feels a little bit like an exorcism, to be honest.
Right.
And trauma becomes trauma in our nervous system because at the time that we experienced whatever it was we experienced, we didn't have the safety, we didn't have the power, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the awareness to actually allow ourselves to fully feel all that the body needed to feel around whatever it was that happened. And so we feel edges of it, we feel into it a little bit sometimes. Sometimes we can have an emotional release, and that's wonderful. It's a step in the right direction. And yet there is also a need to let body feel it as intensely as the body needs to feel it until it's done being felt. And that's not a comfortable place to go to. In fact, it's actually really terrifying sometimes to let ourselves feel that much in our body. But the body is wanting to, and so anytime anytime we're feeling strong, or we've leveled up and we've got some new resource or some new awareness or some new information or a new relationship or a new support system or something that makes us feel stronger, better, safer, more connected, then all of that's going into the nervous system. And then the nervous system says, great, with this new resource, let me see if I can use this new resource as a container to allow myself to revisit whatever I've been carrying with me and feel more of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And in that place, we may not be aware of what's going on. We might just start to feel flooded. And we're like, and we want to look around, and our mind says, why did I just start feeling flooded? And our mind wants to pin it on whatever the closest thing we can grab at.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's just the nervous system having sort of left the present and gone back into the past and has been re-experiencing, trying to complete feeling of the trauma that we've been carrying with us. And so a great concept that I use to help illustrate this for folks is that if the nervous system's capacity to feel something is smaller than the size of what needs to be felt, that's trauma.
Mm.
Right? And so we have to grow the container so that it matches the size of what needs to be felt.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we do that a lot, especially whether it's because of our upbringings, our culture, how we're raised. We're taught to not feel all the feelings. And, you know, if you're crying for whatever it is that you were crying when you were little, maybe, I mean, and it's no one's fault by all means. Maybe you were at church and you were crying and mom said, stop crying.
Sure.
No, don't do it, not right now.
Yeah.
And so we start building things little by little.
Absolutely.
And that's when we come to adulthood and we have carried all these traumas that, you know, throughout our whole existence. And now we don't know exactly what to do with it because we have never really felt all these feelings that needed to you know, to be felt. Is there, I know you mentioned yoga, you did a little bit of that to, you know, use movement and feelings and all that. What are some of those things that anyone can just do to release some of all these feelings and traumas that we've been, you know, keeping for forever?
It all depends on the individual, and I'm gonna be really, really cautious with talking about how to release trauma.
Yeah.
Because the process of kind of diving in can really, really create some dangerous feelings, to be honest. And so I just want to be really careful with that. However, what I will talk about is more about kind of what I was talking in terms of the resourcing side of things. What can we do to build our capacity? And there's tons of things that work at different times for different folks. But I will say that kind of they all come back to paying attention to what the body does when we do them. In other words, I'll give you a simple example. I have a ritual of sitting on my patio every morning with my cup of coffee. And that's a time for me when I just focus in on my body. I listen to my body, but more importantly, with each sip, I really pay attention to how my body responds to each sip of coffee. I love coffee. I love the taste. I love the earthiness. I love the heat. I love the warmth. I love the feel of a great mug in my hand. I love the air outside, no matter what weather it is. I take that in, and so it's a moment for me to really listen listen to my body, but also feel my body going, ah, and really feeling that. So it can be as simple as just a more body mindful cup of coffee, like
Mm-hmm.
movement is another big one. All kinds of movement. So anything from slow movement like walking, slow dancing, all the way up to fast movement, right? Our bodies like all different kinds of movement. Sometimes it likes, pumping iron at the gym. Other times it wants to melt into the bed. Other times it wants something more slow, like a nice walk. Other times we want to feel rocked. So maybe we have a rocking chair and we just pay attention to the sensation of rocking. Sometimes we want to hold somebody else's hand. Sometimes we want to be closer than just holding hands. How does our body feel when we do that? I think water's another big one. So baths and showers of all different temperatures. Singing and using our voice, creating vibrations in our throat, as well as in our bellies and in our chest, can be another great way to help kind of tone up the nervous system in this regard. Intentionally recollecting a past positive experience.
Yes.
Kind of going back to a very distinct moment in time that had a lot of positive emotion associated with it. And so we go back and we do a little meditation to kind of develop that. What did I see there? What did I hear there? What did I smell there? What did I taste there? What was I touching there? What was I wearing? What was the color of the sky? How many birds were in the tree next to me? I mean, these are details that we can actually sometimes access again with really powerful experiences. And when we choose good moments, safe moments, pleasurable moments like that, it helps our bodies to go back there and revisit that same kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we feel ourselves being able to kind of regulate our nervous systems in those ways, to listen to our nervous systems and our bodies in those ways, it makes us feel a lot more confident and powerful. It doesn't necessarily remove the trauma. That's usually step 2. But it sure as heck gives us some breathing room around it. It gives our mind the ability to be a little bit more curious rather than reactive or reflexive.
Yeah, for sure. I think we live in such a fast life with all these distractions, TV, phone. I mean, the phone is a big one, social media and all that. We definitely forget these little things that really makes us feel good. Just literally just taking a deep breath. I mean, how many of all of you that's listening to this, do you take a deep breath today? Probably not. And so those are the little things that can be very helpful, as you mentioned. I mean, singing, we so simple, but it just makes us so happy. Most of us, I will say. And so, yeah, definitely, those are great things to do. Very easy. Slowing down, deep breath, connect with nature, take a walk, move slow, move fast, whatever it is that you're going for, or what feels good to your body. I think those are very amazing reminders of how to going back to our body, feel good, positive thoughts, memories. I mean, we are all in this loop of negativity most of the time, of like, oh, I did that. Yeah, like I did that wrong. I did this. Oh my God, what did I say today? And so on. That remember all these things, I think is just amazing. And it's a good reminder, because all we know I mean, we all know what to do. It's just we need little reminders here and there.
Sometimes we do know, and sometimes we don't actually know.
Okay.
And that's where I love to say to folks, like, okay, so you don't know what to do with that particular feeling or emotion. Okay, no problem. Where's the fire? What happens
Right.
if you don't figure it out right now? All right.
Right.
What happens if your body's feeling like there's a fire is actually the problem? And what if we could give you a little bit of relief from feeling like there's always a fire and you have to put it out at any moment?
Right.
So sometimes people do know what to do with their bodies, and other times people don't. And so that's why I have, a whole slew of things. Try a yoga class, try a swimming class, try this, try that, try this, try that. Let's see what lands. Try massage. Massage is another great one. Any kind of body work, massage, acupuncture, chiropractic, energy work, Reiki, group circles, individual circles, spiritual practices, whatever it may be, but bring the body along with you. Pay attention to the body when you do these things. Get out of your head. Well, maybe not get out of your head, because I don't want to imply that that's actually possible, but set your thoughts aside as they come and find body.
Mm-hmm. Gain a little bit of maybe a new perspective on how your body is reacting to. How I know we mentioned some of the things that we can do on our own. How important it's for people that can't find those answers within their bodies, or doing certain things, as you mentioned, to move and all that. How important do you think is for people to actually look for coaching or counseling, and be open to have someone else to guide them a little bit and find the right ways to maybe release trauma or work on what they're going through?
I think it's absolutely important. I think it's absolutely necessary. And I'm not going to say that it has to even be somebody who labels himself as a coach or a counselor. It can be a mentor of any, it can be a business mentor. For me, it's about connection that feels safe.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling a sense of connectedness and safety with another human being is absolutely an important part of the process. If those kinds of people don't feel like they're available to you, or you feel like the connection and the safety that you have with them is still insufficient, then I would say definitely, counselors, coaches, but specifically anybody who's aware of the body process, who has an orientation towards understanding that this stuff lives in the nervous system. Mm-hmm. Right? We're dealing with neurochemicals, we're dealing with neural pathways, we're dealing with the process of neuroplasticity, which is how the brain rewires itself. Mm-hmm. And that it is not, the brain does not rewire deeply ingrained trauma-based patterns. It does not rewire them with a snap of the fingers and a cathartic moment of release. It's through repetition.
Right.
And I can't stress that one enough. It's repetition. We have to do the new thing sufficient times to replace the old neural pathway. We can talk about it all we want, but we have to actually do and experience something new for the nervous system really to lock in that new mode, or that new approach, or that new reflex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's super important, as you mentioned, to look for either, as you said, a mentor, or someone where you feel good to continue doing the work. And especially when it comes down to, as you mentioned, repetition and try to do, build those positive neural pathways to better ourselves. Do you think, coaching is the most helpful way to actually get rid of the trauma? Is it like a team work, do you think?
For some people, sure. Is it for everybody? No. Is it the only way? Absolutely not.
Yeah, for sure.
I think for certain kinds of trauma, I think you really do need a counselor who really knows what they're doing with the entire nervous system and kind of understands the development of how the nervous system really kind of came to where it's at for each individual. And that kind of work really does kind of tend towards what I refer to as more depth work as well. But yeah, it's I mean, I definitely do what I do because I love it and I believe in it. But I also know that it's not the only way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? People can read things and then use their intuition to kind of navigate through some of that for themselves.
Yeah.
I see some people who come to me that are just kind of like, they meet me and we start working together, and immediately they're just like ready to go. Other folks, takes me a while to kind of help unwire all the crap that's getting in their way of actually connecting with their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really a different process for everybody.
Yeah. Do you think our upbringings play a big deal on the wiring?
Oh, absolutely. How can it not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How can it not? Like I said, the nervous system is just really, really simply, in any given moment, even within this conversation between you and I, our nervous systems are accessing our entire life's data bank of experiences. The body does not forget anything. The mind forgets,
Mm-hmm.
but the body does not. The body is constantly writing to the hard drive, constantly writing to the hard drive. And it's constantly referencing what's on that hard drive. So absolutely, not just our childhood, but every moment of every
That we have encountered, for sure.
that we've encountered. Yeah.
I love that. And I mean, and these are great news for everyone, because pretty much we could rewire ourselves to do whatever else that we need to better ourselves, and in all levels, mind, body, and soul.
Absolutely.
So I think I love that you have mentioned all these points and what exactly does the nervous system with our body. So that's, I think, just understanding just that whole thing, it gives you a new vision, a new perspective on how far you can go from here on.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. This has been great. I love all these pointers, all these little tips, and all the information that you have give us today. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us today?
I think if there's anything, it's just encouragement. It's encouragement to recognize that our nervous systems, we do not understand even. We understand more and more all the time about how our nervous system operates, but we are so far from really truly understanding everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of life for me is in really recognizing that I have the rest of my life to rewire my nervous system. I do not have to do it all right now. I can do one thing, I can do two things, but I don't have to do it all. And I think there's an element of grace that's an important part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And And so for me, it's really all about encouraging people. Let's do this for the long haul. Let's not just do kind of a one and done and then think we're done kind of thing. Let's do this for the long haul. And how do we move more gracefully through our lives, taking in moments of enjoyment, savoring them, and then going back to work.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, life is a non-ending lesson. So,
Absolutely.
mhm,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much. And if
My pleasure.
anybody wants to get in contact with you, or even like book a session, or just have any question for you, where can they find you?
So my website is the best place to reach me through. It's embracingyourwholeness.com. You can also reach me on various social media platforms. Probably the best one is Facebook at this point, and I'm at Connexus Service. That's CONNEXUSSERVICE. Or just look me up online, Scott David Clift. You'll find me.
Awesome. And I will put all his information on the show notes so you guys can get in contact with David. If you need to get in contact with me, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can go to my website, alexbalgood.com. And remember, my book is out. You can get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's called Parents Are Greatest Teachers. So get your copy, message me, leave me a review, and stay in contact. Thank you so much for being here today, and have a blessed day, everyone. Thank you.